entrevista, Demetria, primero quisiera que nos platicara un poco para mis estudiantes de literatura mexicoamericana y literatura chicana de la Universidad de Texas de Permian Basin, que están tomando este otoño de 1999. Para unos que no la conocen, preguntarle sobre su vida, sobre su nacimiento. Naciste en 1960, ¿no?
Sí, en 60, sí, en Albuquerque.
En Albuquerque. ¿Y tus padres eran, qué eran tus padres?
My mother, up until very recently, was a kindergarten teacher, and my father has a career in teaching, and then he was the first Chicano elected to the Albuquerque School Board, and he served for 12 years for 2 terms, and he was also the president of a community college. So he has a long background in education, and then he also, in his late 50s, he spent 2 years in the Peace Corps. He went to Belize and did literacy and also worked with Salvadoran refugees.
That's great. Yeah. And then how many brothers and sisters do you have?
I have one brother and one sister. My sister's a lawyer and my brother's an engineer.
And are they older than you?
Younger. I'm the oldest.
You are the oldest. And then what did you study? Elementary and high school?
I studied at public schools in Albuquerque.
And then you went to Princeton?
Yeah, I went to Princeton and I studied public and international affairs. And there's a school at Princeton called the Woodrow Wilson School of Public and International Affairs. And then I graduated and went back to Albuquerque and became part of a little comunidad, very informal art school that was was headed up by a Dominican nun who was also a painter and a professor of art history. It was called Sagrada Art School. And that's when I started to teach myself how to read and write poetry. I mean, I had written poetry, when I was younger,
yes,
and a little bit at Princeton, but now I was really serious about wanting to become a poet. And so I spent 3 years at Sagrada Art School, which was based in Old Town in Albuquerque.
I see.
And that's where I began to work on my first collection of poetry.
When you were in
Turning.
In high school?
At Sagrada Art School.
Okay.
This was at Princeton.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah, and so my degree at Princeton, Public and International Affairs, turned out to be very different from what I decided to do. So I lived in Old Town, and then also began my career in journalism, covering religion for the Albuquerque Journal, and then I began to do some freelance work, just periodic articles for the National Catholic Reporter, which is a progressive news weekly. It's not. Some people confuse it with the National Catholic Register. No, it's the National Catholic Reporter is progressive and leftist, which had done a lot to cover what was going on in El Salvador. And so by writing some articles for the National Catholic Reporter and covering religion for the Albuquerque Journal, I began to hear the stories of refugees who were coming from El Salvador and Guatemala.
And what year was?
These were the mid-'80s. Mid-'80s. Early to mid-'80s, because I graduated from Princeton in 82 and went back to Albuquerque in 82. And so it was after 82 that I started to do, after 83, 84, I think, that I started to do some interviews for the religion page and for the National Catholic Reporter about refugees and about the sanctuary movement.
That's right, yes. So, and did you get involved with the sanctuary movement?
Well, what I did was I had a lot of friends who were very involved, and I got to know refugees person. I got to know their stories as friends. It was very, very, very moving. It made a deep impression on me because it gave me an awareness of what our government was capable of doing, because we were sending over $1 million a day. Right. And I wrote a poem. Of course, it wasn't published at the time, but I wrote a poem called Nativity for Two Salvadoran Women, 1986-1987. I decided not to write an article. I wrote the poem instead. I had decided not to write an article because otherwise, what I was afraid is if I published an article and said that the women were going to give birth around December, that the Migra could look through hospital records, you see, and find out who they were. So I was very happy to write this poem instead. So that was the end of that. I felt that it was an important thing as a reporter to do, because the most important religion story of the 1980s was the sanctuary movement. It was absolutely the most important religion story of the 1980s. And I had interviewed refugees, I had interviewed members of the sanctuary movement, I had gotten to know them, but I had never witnessed the transportation of refugees, you know, in Mexico al Norte, okay? So it was a really wonderful experience in that regard, to see the whole picture, So that trip was taken in 1986. In 1987, I got word that I had been indicted along with the Lutheran minister. And I was charged with conspiracy against the United States government. That's one count. 2 counts of transporting refugees, and 2 counts of inducing them or encouraging them to enter the country illegally. That's a total of 5 counts, and that was equivalent to 25 years in prison, and then more than $1 million in fines. So it was about an 8-month...
But at that time, your novel was not right?
No, nothing was written. No poem, no novel, nothing. I was just a religion writer for the journal, you know, writing periodic pieces for the National Catholic Reporter and writing my poetry on the side.
That's right.
I was nobody, except that I was from a very prominent political New Mexico family, which helped. My grandmother and aunt had been elected to different county positions, you know, throughout their lives. They were Republicans. My father was a Democrat. They were Republicans. So, you know. So anyway, so
you have a political background.
Yes. So in a way, this was awful, but in a way, it was familiar, because my family was, you know, used to being in the limelight, you know, with controversy and all that.
And you were Catholic.
Yes. I was brought up Catholic. So anyway. So during the 8-month indictment, I traveled a lot with the minister and others to talk about the case. Because for me, the issue was the First Amendment. Does a reporter have a right to get close to a story? To,
that's right.
You know, or was she there as an activist? You know, or maybe she wasn't there as a reporter at all. Maybe she was there bringing the women north and had no intention of ever writing a story. So the prosecution was trying to say that I was just an activist and not a reporter, not a real reporter. So for the 7 months, whatever it was, leading up to the trial, we spent a lot of time talking about the First Amendment, the right of a reporter to get close to a story, that a reporter is not under any obligation to turn in their sources. To turn in, you know, the minister and the others, that you're there to watch, to bear witness. And that this was a very important news story, and so therefore it would make sense for a religion writer to go on a trip like this, that there was nothing unusual about what I did.
Yes.
Okay, and that it was protected by the First Amendment. And then, of course, we talked endlessly about it. It's as if God gave me a